And good evening, and once again, welcome to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And yes, it's me alone this time to bring you a new installment of this week's New Comics, bitches! And by request, there will be a special transition light for each time I do a new book, and it will be this. Because I don't have a working flashlight, I don't know why, but I don't. So, when you see that red light come up, you know I'm gone to a new book. When you see it go off, well, when you see it go on and off. So, by special request. So there's a lot of books to talk about this week. And some of them I'm going to talk about probably a lot. So let's jump right into it. So first we're going to start off. We're going to start off with Ultimates number 17. So we find out, as we found out in the finale of the last issue, that the villain, this mysterious Mr. Merez, is actually, it's not Loki, as we might have believed, but it is Thor's son, Modai. And Modai is kind of pissed off at his dad and at Earth for a couple of pretty good reasons. First of all is that he basically Thor, when Asgard was falling, because of what Reed and the Tomorrow People were doing, he kind of stuck his son in the World Tree in Yggdrasil, and in which he spent like 1,000 years of life, and just basically in that time kind of learning about everything that's happened. Of course, Asgard has fallen. He is perhaps the only survivor other than Thor, and he has something that gives him mental control over perhaps, well, a lot of people, especially his father. And then we cut to basically Casper, Wyoming is being invaded. The assist, of course, is being given by Merez, and it's being invaded by Hydra. And as we know, in the Ultimate Universe, Hydra they're basically anti-government nut bars. They're not old Nazis or anything like that. They're not a ring of spies. They're just anti-government terrorists, essentially. And that's who is being marched into through Wyoming into Casper. And then here comes Shield and the Ultimates. We've got Hawkeye, we've got Falcon holding what seems to be an Avenger M8 from Mass Effect. That I just thought was just interesting and kind of funny, because I'm pretty sure it was intentional that Luke Ross, the artist, put that in there. But we also have, interestingly enough, on the ground, we have the Giant Women, and Cassie Lang is apparently one of them. And we have Spider's Man and Woman. They're fighting alongside. So Miles Morales is now part of the Ultimates, and also fighting alongside of them is Sue Storm. So I'm wondering, kind of still, because I read Ultimate Doom, and I thought that Ben Grimm kind of turned, he turned back human, but he was still, he still had all like these weird powers and everything like that. And I don't remember if he died or not. But it's kind of surprising that he's, because he and Sue kind of, had their own kind of love thing going, and I'm kind of surprised that he's not there, although he may show up. So they're fighting. Of course, here comes the like the Quinn carrier, whatever, and of course Cap is on board, and so is Black Widow, and so is Iron Man. Um, and all of a sudden, Merez, who's there, so he starts unleashing these war machines, um, and they're causing some damage. But of course, here comes Tony and Cap to kind of try to save the day. But almost immediately as Cap comes out, he's shot down. And so we've got a president down type of situation, and it looks like basically that while the fight definitely seems to be going, at least the momentum seems to be going in Shield's favor for a little while. Basically, what we have here is something that Merez has pilfered from Project Pegasus, which is this gem. It's this gemstone, and it seems to be perhaps a. It looks to me awfully like an infinity gem. And I'm wondering if we're kind of going in that direction, if we're going maybe into kind of the Ultimates version of the Infinity Gauntlet, which would be really, really interesting and cool. Except the big problem here is that literally it's like, because we have, at the very end, we have Thor. And, Cassie, she gets one of these big guns and shoots down, she's under Morez's mind control, or Modai's mind control now, shooting down the helicarrier, or the Quinn carrier, whatever they want to call it. And it's kind of plummeting from the sky, and, so our heroes, obviously, they're very much at a disadvantage. And then we have... Cap is on the ground, and he's about to have his brains bashed in by Thor. So the main problem here is that the book is just way too short. Again, $3.99 price tag. I get it for free. I have my sugar daddy who, gives me all the digital download codes. So anything I can get for free, I get for free, and I just read it digitally. And I know you're jealous, so take it up with the people at Marvel, man. But basically what we've got here is a too short story. Also, Luke Ross's art, while really nice, unfortunately is kind of fucked by the coloring. The colorists seem to... they seem to want to make it very bright. Everything is very bright. We get a bit of Modai's backstory, and it's like almost white. It's like the pages almost kind of like are like reflecting off the screen. That's just how white it seems. It seems to have almost kind of this, this palette of very bright colors, and it just kind of makes the page kind of look ugly sometimes. So, despite the best efforts of Ross, you just can't really get that. I mean, this is definitely not... Sam Humphries is very much not, Jonathan Hickman. He isn't filled with the big ideas, the big science-y ideas, and the kind of, all the big stuff that that Hickman was doing in that sense, but he is good at giving big action, which is what we've had over the past couple of issues. And this continues. This is basically the second to last issue of the Ultimates. This is the penultimate issue for the Ultimates of United We Stand. Divided We Fall, coming into United We Stand. So. How this is all going to tie together with Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Spider-Man is because we see that we finally in Ultimate Spider-Man we've kind of finally caught up to where the Ultimates are, because we've just had in that last issue we've had Cap being sworn in as president, and so in fact that next book might deal with Miles being on the ground amidst all of this big fighting. Because I don't think he has a single line of dialogue in this whole book, so I think they're going to save that up. Sue has some cool moments too, which was nice. But also Spider-Woman, again, that may, like I said, we might see this in Ultimate Spider-Man. And Ultimate X-Men, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that kind of wraps this arc up, or this, kind of mini event in the Ultimate Universe. I'm just glad they're kind of all finally converging and going in the same direction towards, okay, now we're all on track, so we can get to where we need to go in the future. So, really exciting, really interesting, but, like I said, just kind of lacking in the art department and just being a very short read, in my opinion. So, about 3.5 out of 5 for Ultimates number 17. So, moving on, we are now going to talk about Punisher Warzone number 1. So, Punisher Warzone number 1. Now, this is, thank God, Greg Rucka, because I was not sure if he was going to be doing Warzone or not. I didn't know if it was going to be under someone else's writing. I didn't know if somebody else was going to be writing this or not. But when I found out that it was him, like, yay! And then when I found out that, well, I knew that Marco Cicchetto wasn't going to be doing the art on this. Instead, they have now Carmine Di Giandomenico. Nice Italian boy. And unfortunately, his art really kind of doesn't look very good. It looks kind of... It looks like everybody's kind of sagging. It's the best way that I can put it. Like their skin is kind of... like they're almost too wrinkly. There's something just askew about the art here. And I'm not a huge fan of it. But the story in itself raises as many questions as it does entertain. So what we really have here, now this is picking up directly after the events of Rucka's Punisher run. And it basically, it opens up with, we see Spidey, and he's reading a bit of the Daily Bugle, where he's reading about, the assault on the Exchange, and how basically there was this device apparently that the Punisher used to get across from one building to another, and of course he deduces that it was indeed one of his web shooters. And this makes him very angry. So he basically tracks down and confronts Frank Castle. Now, Spider-Man is, Frank Castle kind of knows when he's outclassed. That is the one thing that unfortunately, this is going to, I think, end up very badly for the Avengers. Because Frank Castle is a guy who studies his enemies. Basically he knows, and he always has an escape route. He can always get away. And that is the one thing about him that is very formidable. He will not kill, certainly, any of the heroes, but he won't let them stop him either. So what we see here is now, of course, Spidey has kind of drank some of the same Kool-Aid, quote-unquote, that the rest of the public has, sort of, in regards to what happened. That, Frank could have possibly killed police officers and innocent people. So this is, it's Spidey basically thinking, perhaps, this is just, maybe this is just the direction you've always been headed in. Which, is interesting, certainly, because I think for those of you who are reading Jennifer Blood and Garth Ennis's whole take on that, you can kind of see that this is maybe where he would have had the Punisher go, into some place where everybody's guilty and everybody is expendable, as long as they don't get in the way of the mission. But of course, that is not Frank Castle's code. He does adhere to a very strict code. He will not kill heroes, but he sure as hell will hurt them if they get in his way. And so again, he knows that he's totally outclassed here, so he has to be sneaky. And that is one of the things that Frank Castle excels at, is he is a very sneaky son of a bitch. So he does kind of get free of this initial combat situation with Spider-Man, and again yanks off his glove and his web shooter with it. This has Spidey basically going back to Avengers, Tower, whatever you want it to be, and he's basically saying to the Avengers who are there, who have been called, which are Cap, Thor, Iron Man, Black Widow, and Wolverine. And he's basically saying, look, we cannot let this guy keep doing this anymore. I mean, he's using our own stuff to kill people. This is not what we stand for. We don't kill unless we can't help it. Of course, that's not what Spider-Man is saying, but obviously some of these other heroes they have killed. Iron Man has killed. Thor has, I'm sure, killed. Wolverine definitely has killed. Black Widow has definitely killed. But Spider-Man is really the only person that is innocent, really, of any kind of murder, really, except for either kind of almost by proxy, if you will, maybe some of, like Gwen Stacy, perhaps. It's kind of, it's not his fault, of course, but I mean, just that he happens to be Spider-Man, Uncle Ben, that all of these things kind of happen around him, but the only person that he's really kind of guilty of actually putting the end to life of is the character of Charlemagne in the 1986 or 1987 Spider-Man versus Wolverine one-shot, in which we have the death of Ned Leeds, and it's Spider-Man and Wolverine's kind of adventure amongst in kind of the midst of the Cold War, in the 80s, and it's East Berlin and everything like that, and it's a really cool one shot, and I wish I still had it. I wish that it was reprinted somewhere, somehow. So if anybody out there knows where the fuck this is in any kind of print form other than its original, please tell me. But anyway, so going on. So we have basically, he's saying, look, this is not a joke, and everybody's kind of treating it like one. For the moment, especially, everybody except Cap, anyway, because, they all think, okay, well, Frank Castle, I mean, he's one guy. He's a regular, non-superpowered human being. Why would it take people like us to bring him down? He's the police's problem. I mean, that's, and then basically Cap steps up, and Cap, of course, has always had this very adversarial, conflict with Frank Castle, because Frank Castle is a soldier. He was a soldier, and so was Captain America. And he sees basically what the kind of the worst aspects of soldiers and kind of the excuses that they make to do some of the horrible shit that they've done. He sees that same kind of justification in someone like Frank Castle. At least he has over the years. Not specifically here, but we know that's where he's coming from, is that they're both soldiers from two products of two very different wars. Of course, this is not the Frank Castle from Vietnam. This has got to be a Frank Castle from a more recent war, maybe from the first Gulf War or something to that effect, because, this is somebody who's in probably his late 30s to early 40s. And of course, in Garth Ennis's Punisher Max, he was from Vietnam. And even his earlier Punisher stuff, he was still from Vietnam. So he was a guy that was very much in his 50s. you know, possibly his 60s. And we're still going and still kicking and still killing. So we, you know, basically, you know, Cap kind of says, yes, we are going to take this guy down. And then he has, you know, kind of a little confab with Wolverine towards the end there, where Cap basically, you know, where Wolverine basically says to Cap, you know, I don't know about you, but, you know, you know, there are some people that deserve to die. And Punisher, you know, and Frank is kind of getting ready because I think he has kind of a feeling of what's coming, that a storm is definitely coming his way, winter is coming, whatever you want to call it. And Wolverine comes to visit him, basically telling him, warning him, that Frank is kind of going to go down because the Avengers will be coming after him. Kind of one at a time. First, it's going to be kind of the quote-unquote low-level hitters, like people like Spider-Man and people like the Black Widow. But, you know, sooner or later, the trinity of the Avengers, Thor, Cap, and Iron Man are going to come after him. So where will that lead? So I think in each 5 of these parts of this miniseries, we're going to be treated to a different hero, and then kind of maybe a group of them trying to take him down. Now, this is eventually, I'm assuming, going to lead into maybe him becoming part of Thunderbolts. You know, I'm not sure where that's going to really go from there, but and I don't know how often they're going to be doing this title. But if it is, I know that Cheetah is going to be doing all of the covers. But if they do continue with this, I do hope that they do change artists, because that's the only thing that took me out of this book, because I loved the kind of argument that's being posited here, is that we have here essentially a group of vigilantes, and they are kind of, you can see both sides of the argument here, is that, you know, the fact that they haven't taken down Frank Castle before, the fact that they have worked with him, almost each one of them on different occasions have worked with him in one way or another, except for maybe like Thor and Iron Man, have kind of stood alongside Frank Castle, especially Spider-Man, because, I mean, you know, Spider-Man, New York, you know, it's bound to happen. And we've seen a lot of, you know, Daredevil and you know, Daredevil and Punisher kind of team-ups / wars, and a lot of Spidey and Punisher team-ups, but not them fighting each other, really. And that is kind of the crux of this, is like the reasoning behind this seems to be kind of disingenuous, that they're a little bit hypocritical in the sense that they are, you know, that most of them have been kind of lawbreakers at one point or another, and have been given authority kind of by themselves to take the law into their own hands, but just obviously stopping, you know, putting the brakes on when it comes to out-and-out killing, and that's what Frank does. That's his modus operandi there. So it does bring up an interesting moral argument, which I think Rucka is probably smart enough to recognize, and to something that will be brought out, because, you know, now that but I also see that, you know, what they're seeing is a Frank Castle who has crossed the line into perhaps the murder of innocents. And, you know, he's never going to stand trial for it or anything like that, because he's the fucking Punisher. He's going to get away. He always gets away. So, you know, so like I said, there's an interesting argument that is being brought out of Punisher Warzone. I've seen it, you know, in a couple places here around online, especially with Matt, with Agent 42Q. So it's, to me, this is a really, really, really solid book. It's a 4.5 out of 5, with the unfortunate, like I said, the art is just not good. But the writing is so good, and the characterization is so good, that it's like, okay, I'm totally on board. He's got, everybody's very unique voice is very, he's definitely studied who he's going to be writing. So, Secret Avengers. Sorry. So, now on to Secret Avengers number 33. So, basically we have Eric O'Grady in his descendant form now has emerged. He is now the Black Ant. Because, in order to become anything kind of darker than yourself, you have to kind of adopt the name Black. Sort of, or something that, or dark, or whatever. So we have, his descendant self kind of wakes up even after saving the world in the previous arc. And we have the rise of the descendants here, and he basically, he totally fucking blows away Max Fury. And so he kind of releases some of the descendants onto the the satellite that the Secret Avengers are using. But there are for whatever reason there aren't any real other Avengers on board. There's a couple, and we'll get to them in a bit. But Hawkeye right now is with Captain Britain. Yay! It's nice to see Captain Britain kind of taking, front and center a little bit, because he is the protector of the Omniverse. And of course, there's some fun interplay between Hawkeye and Captain Britain. It's like, oh, there's there are Earths that actually respect you, and then later Hawkeye does say, look, I'm just I'm just busting your balls type of stuff. I respect you. You kind of single-handedly held back the Phoenix Force. And Captain Britain says, that's something to brag about. And Hawkeye's like, I would. And then Captain Britain, of course, says, well, that's kind of the difference between you and me. And so they have to go to Earth 666. There's a crisis brewing there, where there is all this insanity going on. I won't get too deep into it, mostly because I didn't feel that the comic got very deep into it. But they have to go to Earth 666, and as you can imagine, Earth 666 is a little on the demonic side. And we have the Avengers of the Undead, and that is worth the price of admission alone, because we get all of these horrific, kind of duplicates of, the Avengers. Spider-Man is a real spider. Captain America is like a werewolf. Punisher is Lord of the Undead. Those of you who are familiar with the older like 90s What If comics, you'll see that was actually a title in which that all kind of the whole kind of X-Men versus Dracula thing from the Claremont Byrne years. And how Storm was kind of in Dracula's thrall and everything like that, and basically Wolverine becomes Lord of kills Dracula and becomes Lord of the Vampires, and actually is Frank Castle with a little help from the hell is it that book, The Darkhold. He can end, he's gotten some help from Doctor Strange, and he can basically end the existence of all vampires, because like all of the superhuman community has been turned into vampires by Wolverine and the rest of the X-Men that were turned by him. It's kind of a fun read, if you could find it. My favorite two, though, is that Hawkeye's 666 self is a real hawk. And you know, it's like this dark colored, you know, dark feathered hawk. And Frankencastle. So yes, Frankencastle exists. He is alive and well and living on Earth 666. There's an undead celestial that they have to fight, and of course, Jericho Drum, Brother Voodoo, is kind of the leader of these Avengers. And it's just that part of the book was so fun. Then we kind of go back to the satellite, and Valkyrie and Venom, or you know, Flash Thompson, are still busy having lots of lusty fornication time. And then here come the Descendants, and Lady Deathstrike is one of them, and she is prepared to. So we have a naked Valkyrie fighting. Fighting Lady Deathstrike, and so on and so forth, and it's basically all about the one Descendant that they picked up, trying to get her son back. And then we have the Descendant version of the Wasp slapping around Hank Pym, and it's like, oh, shoes on the other foot now, motherfucker. So it was just like, and the book just kind of got more and more insane. They built, like, you know, with Jim Hammond, they built like these mini adaptoids, like these mini Human Torches, and they're going around, they're just setting fire to the whole fucking, the whole satellite. Now, where the rest of the there's only one Secret Avenger that seems to be kind of conspicuously missing, of course, that's Beast. But the rest, you know, Captain Britain and Hawkeye, you know, they're doing their thing. Black Widow is nowhere to be found, but she kind of said, you know, I'm gone last issue, you know, because when you figure out that, you know, Eric O'Grady is indeed, you know, he's a life model decoy, you'll start getting it. Another thing that I did really appreciate about Remender's writing here is that he does give the Eric O'Grady adaptoid Descendant, whatever you want to call him, he gives him an inner monologue, and we get to see kind of how this Eric O'Grady came to be, is that he kind of remembers his own death at the boot heel of an adaptoid. But then here he comes, you know, and he's back, but he, you know, he knows that he serves a greater purpose here. So it's just, that part of it was really interesting, and of course, you know, we have, you know, just the satellite being wrecked, you know, Hawkeye and Captain Britain are in some serious trouble, and just, you know, of course, everything going all pear-shaped. Now, Andy Kuhn, who does the art here, kind of looks like if Michael Avon Oeming had like one of his worst days drawing. The art is very, very reminiscent of his work, and it's like sketchier. It's really heavily shaded. The color palette that is used here in this issue is very dark, and rightfully so. But for some reason, it still kind of works. That's the insane thing about it, is the art kind of is. It kind of actually works for this issue. I don't know why that is, but it is. So. I have to give some pretty serious props to them putting together this issue. This is definitely a 4 out of 5 for Secret Avengers 33. It's still a smart and entertaining read. So, you know, it's like, but again, you know, his whole Secret Avengers run has kind of been like, it's really had this kind of ups and downs, you know, these peaks and valleys where it gets really good and then it kind of meh, and then it meh. And this is one that's kind of more. So good. Okay, so on to Captain America and Black Widow number 636. And really, I don't give a shit about the plot. I'm reading it. I'm looking at it because it's Francesco Francavilla. I have no idea really what's going on. This whole, you know, all of these kind of multiverse. It's just it's too kind of fucked up to wrap my head around. But basically, what we have in this issue, really more than anything, is Cap and Black Widow being really, really badass as they fight like these huge, almost like, you know, War of the Worlds-esque tripods, but they're controlled by Hydra of this particular universe, and this Earth in this particular universe. So I mean, that in and of itself is just a fun idea. I was kind of hoping that they'd go kind of all out with the whole kind of, you know, maybe H.G. Wells-ish type of Earth, and that these were indeed Martians, maybe, that were inside of, or some kind of alien life form. But it's really cool. It's very, you know, I mean, the art kind of tells the story, and the story looks gorgeous. So it's absolutely a 4 out of 5. You know, like I said, I mean, just I don't care what Cullen Bunn's writing as far as the dialogue is concerned. Some of it, yeah, of course. I mean, if you read it, it makes sense. But I mean, I honestly, I don't really care about what is going on as far as the dialogue is concerned, because I don't like Cullen Bunn. I think he's kind of a shitty writer. I think he may be great on The Sixth Gun. I'm not really sure. I've read one issue of that. I thought, this is pretty good. But everything else he does is kind of blown. One way or the other, I like to see Francavilla have fun. And this is definitely one of those titles where it's allowing him to have a really good time. It's kind of written towards Francavilla's strengths and towards Francavilla's ideas, you know, to have, because I mean, he's done, you know, if you follow him on Blogspot or anything like that, or on Twitter, you've seen some of his work. You know, it's very much, you know, in the direction of, he likes the old radio shows, he likes the pulps and all that kind of stuff, and you know, so it's huge fun from an artistic standpoint, and I'm sure that the story will end up making some sort of sense at some point in the future. But like I said, as soon as Francavilla is done, I'm done. So that's why I'm not really bothering to get into the story. Okay, so that was fast, huh? So now on to Amazing Spider-Man number 696. Now this book was, oh, it's good. I'm really liking the fact that Dan Slott has brought Christos Gage on board again, because it's given this book oomph. And I like that. I like when this book has real impetus for me to read it and say, okay, I must devour this because it's Spider-Man and it's fun and it's cool and all this really interesting stuff is happening, and that's where we're at right now, finally, after all of the kind of, you know, kind of misses that, you know, kind of the missed opportunities that Slott has had lately. This is, you know, one of those books where it's getting me like, okay, I'm good. I'm back into it now. I'm not disliking it as I was with, you know, the Lizard No Turning Back arc. Didn't care for it. But basically here we have, you know, we see that Spidey, you know, Peter Parker has been taken hostage by the Phil Urich Hobgoblin back to Shadowland to find out what what he's done with the suitcase, because, you know, of course, Spider-Man has taken it, and we think that at the end of last issue that, okay, has Spider-Man been unmasked again? Oh shit. But no, of course, this is the same type of thing that we've seen a number of times before, is that Peter Parker is, you know, because he's always taking pictures of Spider-Man, and now that he's kind of been outed as being kind of the tech guy for Spider-Man, that's why he's been chosen. So they're using him, of course, as leverage, as a hostage, so that that Spider-Man will come and bring back the suitcase that has whatever it is inside of it. And of course, you know, we have this stuff going on with Madam Web. She's in a coma, and you know, you know, all of the skin is off her fingernails. She has no ID, and you know, all that she has was a burner phone. So they're kind of thinking, well, maybe she's maybe a fugitive of some sort. So it's that in and of itself is kind of interesting what's going on there. And then, of course, Max Modell gets this email from Phil Urich, Hobgoblin Phil Urich, and basically saying, if you don't get Spider-Man here, blah blah blah, we're going to kill Parker. And Max is like, oh shit, I don't know how to get in touch with Spider-Man, but at least I'll see what I can do about helping out Peter. And so he goes and grabs the suitcase, and he thinks to himself, well, I bet a lot of the people that the Hobgoblin deals with, they're probably not super geniuses. And of course, this super genius does something kind of stupid, and we'll get to that in just a second. Now we have our other Hobgoblin, Roderick Kingsley, kind of rooting around Phil Urich's apartment, trying to figure out what's going on with him. Of course, he sees the pictures of Nora Winters, and thinks, well, what do goblins do with pretty blondes? So that's going to be kind of his ace in the hole when he goes to kind of get back his, what is his right, because he, was perhaps the original Hobgoblin. And that's still something that I'm a little uncertain about, because there were like 3 Hobgoblins. And one of them, became Jack-O-Lantern, or Jack-O-Lantern became Hobgoblin. I don't remember which was which. And you had, the other Kingsley, the Kingsley brother, the fashion guy who was him, and he died. And of course, you had Ned Leeds, as we talked about earlier. He's dead too. So Max, again, doing the stupidest thing that a smart person could do, but of course the most noble thing that he could do as well, which is to bring the case to the Kingpin and the Hobgoblin to get Peter out of there. Of course, what they don't realize is that he snuck in one of Spidey's web shooters. And of course, this the machine that that what's-his-face, Stone, I think it's Stone, has built to really ramp up Spidey's spider sense. He is still going on, and basically, Peter's kind of cut through his bonds because, of course, he's just a geek to them. And he puts on the, he grabs the web shooter, and all kind of hell is breaking loose as soon as they open up the suitcase. And in the suitcase is the Goblin Key. The Goblin Key is basically the key that will unlock Norman Osborn's basically his arms cache. Basically all of the weapons that he used while he was the Green Goblin, and all of the weapons that he accumulated for himself while he was head of Hammer. Of course, during the whole Dark Reign saga. And I also forgot to talk about the Flash of Gold, is that we do have this portent of the world ending in a flash of gold, and that's of course coming from Madame Web herself. And then as she mentions that, of course, in her inner monologue, we have this Octobot, this gold Octobot crawling out of the water and onto the docks of somewhere in New York. But as soon as the case is open, here comes the other Hobgoblin. So it's Hobgoblin. Why can't I talk? It's Hobgoblin versus Hobgoblin, and of course, Kingsley has got it all over the pretender to the throne. Because while Phil Urich might be totally insane, he's not as kind of calculatingly insane as he's more of the crazy nut bar insane, as to Roderick Kingsley's more kind of calm insane. It's just, this is a really fun issue of what is looking to be a really fun arc. And of course, this is all building up towards, Spider-Man number 700, which will be the end of Amazing Spider-Man, at least for probably another 12 months. Because as soon as this is done, we're going to have Superior Spider-Man, which is not going to be Peter Parker. And we're going to have, and we don't know who it is yet. There's a lot of potential, you know, who could it be, who could it be? Some people thinks that he might have spoiled it in a tweet that he put out. BleedingCool.com is kind of all over that. But they won't reprint the tweet in its full form. I think Newsarama also ran something about it, and I think they did actually print it, but I didn't look at it. Because I'm just kind of waiting to find out. And also, as Matt talked about, Agent 42Q talked about in his Wednesday serial this last week, is he did talk about, you know, kind of all the bullshit that's going on Twitter about, you know, people attacking Dan Slott and him getting death threats, whether fake or real, about, you know, Spider-Man, you know, and that, you know, that's, you know, they're so upset, you know, why do you hate Peter Parker so much, and all this kind of bullshit, and, you know, everybody just calling him a total dick and an asshole, and you know, Slott will retweet a lot of this stuff, and, you know, basically just kind of, you know, say, look, guys, it's a fucking comic book, which is what everybody should be saying. I mean, of course, I cared when Grant Morrison, quote unquote, killed Batman, because, you know, he's my guy. But did I write Grant Morrison threatening to kill him? No, because I know that Grant Morrison is still capable of writing some really good stuff. Unfortunately, none of it was on Batman, except for Batman and Son. But anyway, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, why do people let this shit carry them away? It's just so stupid. But absolutely a 4, almost close to a 4.5 out of 5, because I'm just still not comfortable with Camuncoli's art. It does take, unfortunately, some of the package away. If Ramos was doing this, or you know, particularly Stefano Caselli, or really especially Marcos Martin was doing this, I would be much more insanely happy. But they're sticking with Camuncoli for right now, and even Camuncoli is going to be the artist. Ramos and Camuncoli are going to be the artists on Superior Spider-Man. So where it's going from here, don't know. But this was a really fun read. So now on to the 2 independent titles that I'll be talking about this week. Well, I'm sorry, no, I'm going to save them. I'm going to save them for the picks of the week, in which there are many. Very surprisingly, there are, by my count, there are 5 great books this week, all deserving of the 5 out of 5 rating, the coveted 5 out of 5 rating. But there is one at the very top, and it was really hard to pick. So I'll get to that shortly. So, transition time. So now we're on to DC, and it's The Flash number 13. Basically, as we left it with prior to the 0 issue, because yes, I know that has been something that Ghost Critic has been kind enough to point out a couple times, is that we have had to go back and read issue 12 of many of these issue 13 books, because the issue 12s for a lot of them were cliffhangers to where they are right now. So, you know, some of them were kind of either standalones or they completed an arc, in which you can kind of go into these not having paid very close attention to them. The books that did that, some of them I think was a smarter move. Some of them I thought, you know, to kind of really stretch it out. Yeah. But anyway, Flash number 13. So we've got, at the end of the excellent Flash number 12, we had all of the guerrillas from Gorilla City invading the Gem Cities. However, I mean, Keystone City, whatever, thus the Gem Cities. And they're all kind of coming after Flash because they want the Speed Force. Now this is I'm familiar enough with Flash, you know, because I remember reading it back in the in the 80s when you had like Solovar and Grodd and everything like that, and you had the you had Gorilla City, and that was a friendly place for Flash to go unless Grodd was attacking. The hyper-intelligent apes and everything like that. But there was never, to me, really anything. Of course, I didn't really read it regularly, and I was a kid. But I was never really too tuned in to the fact that Barry Allen had a real connection with that place, other than, well, there are super intelligent talking apes, but this finally gives an explanation as to why the gorillas are so important to the Flash universe, is that they are connected to the Speed Force. They see it as their right to be connected to the Speed Force as the Flash is, and not his. So they want to consume it from him. So that, in and of itself, something that Manapul and Buccioletto did is really very, very smart. So I mean, that's to bring them in a way. And those of you who are kind of more, not quite Bronze Age, kind of more into the modern age Flash. If I'm wrong about the whole Gorilla City stuff, please feel free to correct me. But like I said, I just think it's really smart that they made this connection, so it makes it seem like, okay, there's a reason for them to be after the Flash. But ultimately what we have here is a kind of a cool bad guy, good guy team-up as the gorillas invade, and so the rogues, they have to kind of do their part, because if Keystone City is just burned to the ground, then what are they going to pillage and loot? So it's time for the rogues to put aside their own differences, their differences against Flash, and throw in with, against, well, not with the Flash, but definitely against the apes. And of course there's some ham-fisted, references to, Planet of the Apes, get your stinking paws off me type of stuff. And, it's they were predictable, but still fun enough to do. And of course, what we eventually have, when we see Grodd, why is he, and I saw this on, I think Newsarama or Comic Book Resources, their review of it, and it's like, yeah, when did Gorilla Grodd turn into Grape Ape? Because it's like, he's purple. Why is he purple? That doesn't, I mean, I know that they want to distinguish him in some way. Well, just, giving him the big kind of crown that he's wearing, I would say, well, it's King Grodd, so that's the king. But I guess they wanted, that Buccioletto wanted, because he's the colorist here, he wanted to give him something that would make him pop. So they made him kind of not incredibly purple like Grape Ape, but purple enough. Unless they are doing some kind of weird homage to Grape Ape, in which case I'm all for it. There's a moment where Trickster, who has just been kind of given the shaft by the rogue, saying, okay, you're not really one of us. He's ready to kind of show Grodd around. He's going to kind of give him the tour, give him all the ins and outs and exactly how to fight each one of these guys or whatever. And for his, for all of the Trickster's, potential advice or help that he might have given him, he gets his fucking arm torn off. It's like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened. But I mean, what we have here is a very well and evenly paced book. Of course, which with Francis Manapul art that is just to die for. It's gorgeous, and I mean, for the most part, beautifully colored by Buccioletto, and just them co-plotting. I mean, this is a really, really, really good book. I'm really glad the Flash is kind of, it's very, very light. It's, I think I kind of talked about this at the very beginning of The Flash. It's kind of like, to me, it kind of feels like Burn Notice, the show. you know, kind of in the early days of that show when it was, you know, you kind of had a formula, but it was fun. Even though there were some kind of terrible things that were going on, it was still a fun, breezy show, and that's very much how I feel about the Flash. Is that, you know, every issue is fun, it's breezy, it's light, except when it does get a little bit too on the heavy side, which has happened. But that it's getting kind of to this point. Of course, Manipul being back on art is a huge difference maker. So 4.5 out of 5 easy for Flash number 13. So, it is time for us to talk about Justice League Dark number 13. So, Justice League Dark number 13, yes. In celebration of this, I will light another cigarette because we're talking about John Constantine here. We have... yeah, the bad guy's Nick Necro. If we didn't see that coming from the Zero issue, shame on you. But there are so many, I mean, because that's not really a shock, but there's so many awesome moments in this book. With, with Constantine and Black Orchid kind of miniaturizing Blackbriar Thorn, or if that's, I can't remember which one's which, if Blackbriar Thorn is the tree or the big trolley guy, big fiery troll guy. And he kind of, miniaturizes him, puts him in this little cage. Reminds me of that old Buffy episode, the Halloween episode, in which it's the fear demon and everything like that. And of course, it's just this little tiny demon. But, that's really cool. And of course, we see that Black Orchid has some classified powers. Is that she can reach into both the red and the green. Do I smell maybe a bit of a Deus Ex Machina that might eventually show up in Rot World? I don't know, but we'll find out. Of course, Black Orchid is already part of that because she's in Animal Man right now. Whereas Swamp Thing is dealing with Deadman and Poison Ivy. And Deadman in this issue, so awesome. Jeff Lemire taking over this title is literally the best thing that could have happened to it. There's nobody who has, obviously, the more inside track on what's going on. There's no one who can better tie it into the other kind of Magic titles. There's only one other, perhaps better person that might be able to do this, and we'll get to that person in a while. I know we're closing in on an hour here, but we've got still a few issues to go here. But this was just terrific, and I loved how Deadman, kind of uses both his spiritual and his acrobatic side as he's trying to take possession of the tree, the giant tree that is going to stomp on Zatanna. And of course we have Madame Xanadu back in London trying to save Tim Hunter, who's being attacked by Felix Faust. So we've got that craziness going on now too. And of course, Nick Necro basically saying that he is going to, he's going to destroy, kill, crush, kill, destroy, Constantine, and, but then Z offers to go with him wherever he's going. Of course, Constantine and Z share a kiss, which they probably haven't had in a really long time. So we go to the House of Mystery and the House of Secrets one being piloted by, House of Secrets being piloted by, well, I can't remember which one is which, but House of Secrets, one of them is being piloted by Nick Necro, the other is being piloted by John Constantine. It is a mad race to stop Nick Necro and to get Zatanna back. And of course, that's when Nick Necro lets out his demons, and you know, it's all about the vengeance for him, baby. And it's a really incredibly solid issue. Another incredibly solid outing from Lemire and Mikhail Janin. Mikhail Janin just does some really wonderful art here. There was a kind of clumsy panel that I saw that just kind of stuck out to me like a sore thumb, which is when, you know, there isn't, you know, it's like Constantine is being hurt in a kind of a severe way, but it kind of looks like, you know, rather more like a, you know, there's no, it just kind of stuck out as like, well, that doesn't really look like he's being hurt that badly. Where the, you know, the intention is, yes, he's being hurt badly. So, but no points off for Mikhail Janin. Again, like I said, really solid, 4.5 out of 5, all the way for Justice League Dark number 13. Now moving on to the third, or the second of the 4 number ones that I'll be talking about this week. And this is Talon number 1. Of course, springing forth from the pages of Night of the Owls and Court of the Owls and the everything owl-oriented, as we have Scott Snyder co-plotting with James Tynion IV writing and Guillaume March on art. Interesting to see Guillaume March on a book that is not led by the ladies, because we know Guillaume March is kind of a cheesecakey guy, but as he proves in this issue, and as he did in the 0 issue of Talon, is he's also a really good artist who can do some really nice, really nice, just kind of non-cheesecakey stuff. Basically, Calvin Rose, former assassin for the Talon, is now striking back at the Court of the Owls. And, you know, almost immediately upon, you know, going back into Gotham, we have him confronting an owl, you know, another Talon. And in this particular Talon, you know, of course, you know, these Talons, they are undead. They are kind of technically whatever means were used to bring them back from the dead are definitely being used here. And we see him, you know, fighting with a female Talon, which thankfully is not a cheesecakey Talon, but you know, is well, maybe a tiny bit, as much as this book will allow for. And we have he uses a rather unusual and a really cool way to dispatch the Talon that is after him, by basically sticking a you know, he's got all these, you know, kind of escape artisty and also assassinate tricks up his sleeve, because that's his training. You know, he sticks a knife completely through the side of one of the Talon's heads, but you know, not like zombies, they don't just drop dead, because apparently they're still functioning. But what he does is he puts, you know, the knife blade is still sticking out of the other end. He takes a taser and zaps the metal, and that just sends the current through the owl. But he is still kind of in bad shape because of this. And there we have the entrance of Sebastian Clark, which is this old dude who has had his eye on Calvin and the Court of Owls for some time. Gives him a little bit of backstory on what exactly has happened with the Court of Owls, how they were all kind of, you know, how the court was kind of all killed, doesn't get into talking about Lincoln March or anything like that. I don't know if that's above his pay grade or if he's trying to keep something secret. But Sebastian March is definitely an enigma here. But he's also kind of, you know, at least for now, he's definitely presenting himself as an ally to Calvin Rose. And basically gets him outfitted, but also tells him that the people that he failed to kill, his first real assassination targets, Mama and Baby Washington, are still out there, and they could very conceivably once again get on the court's radar. So he is kind of fighting for them in a big way. So he wants to get back out there, and I didn't do my transition, did I? Fuck it. So he's ready to get back out there. To me, well, first of all, this is a really, really dense read. I mean, this is lots and lots of exposition, a lot of dialogue, but very, very smart. Because, you know, with Snyder co-plotting, but James Tynion, I mean, James Tynion, he's a very talented writer, I think. And I think that he's got the right tack to take at this type of character. Of course, you haven't really yet to read anything else by the guy, other than this and the co-writing that he's done in kind of the B stories of Batman, or you know, of course, the Batman Annual with Mr. Freeze, which was awesome. You know, just some really good work. One of the things that I do really also like about Guillaume March's design of Calvin Rose here is that he has almost kind of an avian look to his face. It's very kind of almost jaggedly defined. His nose is almost, it's not like obscenely beakish, but it is kind of, it looks kind of bird-like. It's a really interesting profile that he strikes. So that was one thing that I was very, very much enjoying while I was looking at his presentations of Rose. And the way he draws him is that he does, like I said, he just kind of looks bird-like. And I think that that's a really cool way to present him. So I actually kind of think that Sebastian Clarke, and this is, I mean, this is a huge wild guess on my part, I think it's Bruce Wayne in disguise, kind of, maybe. Or someone maybe that even works somehow with Batman Incorporated, something, I don't know. It just seems like he's kind of built like Bruce Wayne, except of course he's an old guy, but maybe, you know, obviously Bruce Wayne being master of disguise, so on and so forth. And this has nothing to do with death of the family, so who knows? But that's my theory, and I'm not really sticking with it. But I think it would be interesting. So this was a 4.5, again, another 4.5 out of 5. Terrific work by Snyder and Tynion and March. Just a really, really good read. Now on to another #1, and this is a one-shot, and it is National Comics Madam X. Now, I feel like the biggest idiot on the face of the planet that I did not realize who this was earlier. But I'll tell you why I didn't realize who this was earlier. The Madam X here is Madame Xanadu. The reason I didn't think that it was Madame Xanadu, and that it was just someone who calling themselves Madam X, who also happened to be a tarot card reader and was able to see kind of the future and have some magics at her disposal, was that we have 2 books right now that have Madame Xanadu in them. I mean, we have Demon Knights and we have Justice League Dark, so why would, you know, because all these one-shots, they're kind of maybe, like I said with Rose and Thorn, maybe kind of, you know, kind of testing out the waters to see, you know, is this kind of maybe like a Top Cow pilot season type of thing? Are they trying to kick off maybe another title that might end up becoming part of the New 52? I don't know. But this one was definitely my favorite of the 3 that were out there. Because I didn't realize it really until I read another review of it, which kind of mirrored a lot of my own opinions about it. Because this is basically, it's Madame Xanadu in a more kind of urbane, well, not urbane, but a more kind of contemporary setting. She doesn't have any of the kind of more mystical. She seems to be very much kind of almost kind of modern woman. And, you know, she works for a law firm, and they've just taken on this defendant who is accused of, and this all happens in Louisiana, in New Orleans, and they've taken on this, no, I'm not even going to try. They're taking on this case of this woman, this voodoo priestess, who is accused of murdering someone who is on like the city council or something like that, and took a very strong stance against the practices of voodoo and their rituals and so on and so forth. And they had very public fights with one another, and so when he finds her stabbed to death, and apparently by the work of a zombie, that some mysticism seems to be involved here. But what of course is uncovered is that it's not a zombie; it's unfortunately an all too human being that happened to be part of the kind of voodoo cult. Which is, and they're all kind of like, they're all addicts. Most of them are addicts. And that's how they kind of make this discovery. And, and they both kind of, this voodoo priestess and Madame Xanadu, they kind of have it out with each other. And, not in a mystical way, but, kind of like, one of them is kind of like rebuking the other on their use of magics. The very end is kind of a big shock ending, because Madame Xanadu sees her own future, and it has to do with the guy that she actually works alongside. And I thought it was a really neat cliffhanger, and I'm like, but it's only this one issue, so it's kind of ending. So it's like, where are they going to go with this? And it's like with Rose and Thorn, that also had a pretty neat cliffhanger too. And I'm like, I want to know more. I want to see more of these characters, actually. So to kind of get these things and kind of almost be cheated that they're not kind of a more self-contained issue is kind of not a rip-off per se, but it just felt kind of bad. So this was a 4 out of 5. Particularly because it's written by Rob Williams, but the art by Trevor Hairsine is just awesome. It is really terrific art. So just great stuff there. All in all, 4 out of 5. Like I said, a really solid read. So I mean, it was just, I don't think that we'll see this come to any kind of fruition really, but it's a good read. So now on to the books of the week, all 5 of them. I'm going to start with the one that is, I just give it a 5 out of 5 because I thought it was just so awesome, and it's a goof, absolutely, and it's A Babies versus X Babies, whereas Scotty Young is basically, and the illustrator, I can't remember the illustrator's name. But, of course, it's, little toddler versions of the Avengers and little toddler versions of the X-Men, and they're fighting these little kiddie fights, and it's just awesome. I mean, it's really, really funny. I mean, it's basically for anybody who liked, and especially for the people that kind of hated AVX, this is a great read. Because it really just kind of sums up kind of the infantile silliness, I think, of the whole AVX thing. So, I mean, that's why I think this book is so fucking great, is that I think it's almost like fiercely satirical. If this weren't more kind of aimed at kids, which it is, but it's also aimed at adults. I mean, anybody could read this and walk away feeling this was a really fun and very entertaining read. So I suggest to anybody who can, if you needed to read it digitally, if you can still pick it up at your comic book store, get it. It's a lot of fun. I read it while I was in the comic store. I'm like, I have to buy this because it's just too much fun. It's so awesome. It's a total 5 out of 5. It made me laugh hysterically. It was, really kind of cute and fun in a lot of ways. It's a really excellent all ages book, and I just loved it. I loved it to death. So it was a 5 out of 5, easy. It made me very happy. Number 2 of picks of the week. Shit, I'm sorry. Okay. So number 2 of my picks of the week I'm not even going to do it anymore because I'm at my picks of the week now, and you'll want to know what they are, so I'm not going to bother to give you transitions, so you can't skip over anything. Okay, and that is the Shadow number 6. Finally, we have an issue of this comic that really kind of blasts out from what the promise of a Garth Ennis Shadow would be. Is basically we have, the whole issue opens with, Cranston, with Lamont and Margot and Finnegan all kind of witnessing the general committing seppuku, which until reading this issue I never knew meant literally stomach cutting. And Taro Kondo is acting as his second. Of course, the second is the guy who, when the pain becomes too much, they chop the head off. And it is, of course, in these moments that Kondo basically says, basically tells the general that he's kind of been, that he's kind of bullshitted him the whole kind of way, that it wasn't really a failure and all this stuff. And, he plans on visiting his daughters after his death. And so, I mean, basically, this is a man, as we see, who is completely and totally without honor. Even though the general seems to have honor, and which is why he's taking the honorable way out. And it's just what we have here. Eventually, kind of coming from that, are some really awesome Cranston and Shadow beats. And basically, Cranston, he kind of gives, Finnegan, he gives Finnegan what for, to not to put too fine a point on it. Basically, he's saying, you're a patsy, you're a total, you're the only reason that you have been given the power that you have is so that if anything comes to blame, they can point it at you, and any successes that you have, they will go up the ladder to your superiors. That's the only reason that you have a job in Army intelligence. And, we get a lot of course, Garth Ennis' kind of, his kind of war beats where, he obviously has a good handle on the militaristic side of, particularly World War II. And then we have Kondo being met in the desert by the Shadow. And the Shadow calls them all out and, says, come on, basically, come and get me. Shadow, he's got his twin 45s. I mean, then there's like 40 or 50 of these soldiers. I mean, he's not going to be able to cut them down that fast. And so they come charging at him, and of course he's planted explosives all over the place. And they're just, charging into death. And as they're charging, the laugh starts slow, and then it becomes harder and harder and higher and higher and grander, and there's it is the Shadow laugh, the laugh without mirth, the laugh that seems to come up from the pits of hell. And basically what they have determined is that what they were indeed carrying wasn't fake, that it was in fact uranium, and it's in fact uranium-235, which, as some of you might know, has a very important historical significance, which we do get to, we see, Cranston's work as the Shadow, but some of basically the aftermath of that, because just like while Finnegan was like playing gin or something like that with Margot. You know, he came in and snapped the necks of all these people, and so he meets up with some British soldiers because they know they can't get out through China. They can't go through Shanghai to get back to America, so they go through India. This is, of course, still when the British Empire controlled India. And they're bringing the uranium-235 back with them on this operation. And of course, you know, Margot says something about, so the Americans will get their death ray, and you know, and Lamont kind of thinks about that. He's like, no, I don't think it's going to be a death ray. I mean, that's a little bit too Dime Store novel-y of this, you know, Dime Store magazine type of thing, don't you think? And then we have this supreme epilogue, where, because Kondo has not died, he was not killed by the Shadow. He escaped. No one escapes the Shadow. And we have this epilogue from 1945. And this epilogue basically tells about how Taro Kondo has had a good war. He's gotten a lot of spoils from war. He's, you know, kind of retreated to live out the remainder of the war kind of in semi-seclusion, and he's just, you know, he's having a grand old time of everything. And you know, and it's just on this one particular day that he happens to look up in the sky and sees a plane coming overhead. Well, what kind of plane could this be? It's in this relatively remote area of Japan. Not terribly remote, but somewhat remote. It's not a major metropolitan area. It's just this little place called Hiroshima. And so this payload of this bomb containing uranium-235 creates a second sun in the sky. And for those brief moments where Kondo is still alive, as his retinas start to burn, and his flesh starts to disintegrate, and the blast wave hits, and, you know, who knows how things will end. And then just over this last page of this great mushroom cloud, we have the eyes of Lamont Cranston as the Shadow, and just, I know. And I'm like, fuck yeah. That's the Shadow, motherfucker. And you don't mess with the Shadow, because no one escapes the Shadow, and the Shadow never fails. So absolute 5 out of 5 for Shadow number 6. The last number 1 that I will be talking about this week is a new book by Nick Spencer from Image called Bedlam. This is a wow. I mean, I don't know if my shop got it early or something like that, because I read it and I see that in previews for this week it's supposed to come out this week, and I'm like, huh? That doesn't make any sense. Either that's a misprint or I don't know what's going on. But basically, Bedlam starts 10 years prior. And there is this super duper psychopathic killer called Madder Red. M-A-D-D-E-R, not Matter. Madder Red. And he is guilty of the deaths of maybe 2,000 people. And he is kind of not under siege necessarily, but he's taken a number of hostages on this, particularly on this children's field trip. And he's not fond of children, let's just put it that way. And he wears this crazy fucking mask, and it's, you know, adorned with red, and, you know, it's just, it looks terrifying. It's kind of like Button Face, sort of, in in Cabal or Nightbreed or whatever you want to call it. But just, you know, it's black and white and just red. And Riley Rossano, the artist, I mean, just really, that's something that, you know, the black and white art is just gorgeous. And all the flashback stuff takes place in black and white, except for these splashes of red. And he's playing poker with the last living child. I mean, he's killed everybody else in this room. And he's pretty well fortified. And, I mean, just horrifyingly crazy. And here comes kind of this nameless, faceless, you know, kind of helmeted super dude come in to stop Matter Red. We don't know who this person is. There's no name that's given to this anonymous vigilante. And he takes the child and, you know, basically, you know, you have that moment where this is where normally, okay, well, the hero would do something weird or fucked up to say, you know, just kind of amazing to save the kid, but no. Matter Red slits the kid's throat, throws her aside, and then there is, you know, the big smackdown that comes from the vigilante. Then we are suddenly in the present day, and there's this, we have this very kind of gaunt-looking guy who is kind of starting his day. It's like this announcement to the city of how they can better themselves, and, you know, everything can be better, and, you know, as long as they kind of keep, you know, kind of pressing on, and so on and so forth. And, you know, doing everything that everybody can to make this city better. And in the midst of this, you know, he kind of gets sick of this, and he pulls the radio out of the wall, or pulls the plug out of the wall, but somehow it's still broadcasting. And we have the voice of Matter Red. And he's talking about these planted bombs in children, physically, and he doesn't say how, because it's like, you don't want to know how. And it's utterly terrifying. And then it goes back to another black and white sequence in which he is being interrogated at the police station. Again, it's utterly terrifying. And eventually, you know, he's talking about how the cops are hypocrites and how they won't do what's necessary, and how they won't do what the public truly wants them to do, which is to bring them out so they can put it, you know, so they can cut his head off and put it on a stake and, you know, show it at the edge of town. And I mean, it's just, the crazy just keeps ramping up and ramping up and ramping up, and then suddenly he blows himself up. And then we go back to this kind of, you know, schlub of a guy who is, you know, who goes to buy a prepaid cellular phone. He doesn't really know what he wants, and, you know, you just get this feeling that this guy is very, very unhinged. He is not right. And he witnesses these two gangbangers chasing down another gangbanger, and this kid is, you know, the one that they're chasing. He's being accused of ripping off these drug dealers, or skimming from them. And, you know, he's been warned about what's going to happen, and it's basically, here comes this lone guy into this whole situation, and basically starts to kind of lay down exactly how this would have happened. It wouldn't have been just this kid. You know, he wouldn't have done it 3 times, which is what he's pointing out. He's kind of going over the math of it, and, you know, I mean, they're sticking a fucking gun in this guy's face, and you know, and he, you know, sticks his tongue out, and he licks the barrel of the gun. I mean, he's just, this is a guy who is clearly out of his mind. and actually points the gun at his own shoulder and has the guy shoot him in the shoulder. And then he takes a gun, he puts it to, he puts it to his leg, and he fucking shoots him in the leg. And he's making them do this, and then they eventually run away. Now, it's also important to point out that at this point in time, there are these these murders. There's still kind of almost like a cult of people that follow Matter Red, and there are these murders, these horrific, gruesome mutilation murders that are going on. And he calls this, now basically this blowing up Matter Red, I don't really want to give too much more away, but it seems that this guy perhaps was Matter Red. And now he wants to maybe do good. So what do? How do you proceed from here? How do you take the story of a total psychopathic madman who has arguably about 2,000 kills to his name, who apparently, committed suicide, although it seems to be that it was the wrong guy, and now he's alive again, or he's been alive the whole time, and now he actually seems to be the tagline on the front cover of the comic is, it says, "Is evil something you are or something you do?" And that seems to be kind of the mission statement of this book going forward. This was a fantastic, absorbing, terrific read. It was absolutely fascinating, and it's huge. It's like 54 pages. It's really big. I mean, it's like when Nick Spencer doesn't dick around, and this is only $350 for this much. And I mean, the art is strange and crazy, and just, it's a fascinating book. I'm not shitting you. It's really terrific. So this was, again, an absolute 5 out of 5. My barely runner-up for this week, and this is really where I'm going to stop for tonight, and we will do the absolute pick of the week tomorrow. But last one I'm going to talk about tonight is iVampire number 13. Like I said, it's barely the runner-up, because this issue is so awesome. So basically we have, now on the cover, we see this character of Deborah Dancer. Who is Deborah Dancer? Well, for those of you who are actually fans of iVampire prior to when Fialkov and Sorrentino started to rip the joint up with how fucking amazeballs this series is, back when J.M. DeMatteis started this book, he had these two kind of cohorts of Andrew Bennett. One of them was this old Russian dude named Dmitry Mishkin, and the other was this beautiful young blonde woman named Deborah Dancer, who was, of course, kind of in love with Andrew Bennett. And in those old stories, Mary is very clear. I mean, it's all very black and white. He still kind of dresses in this kind of almost very flamboyant kind of, you definitely get the sense that that iVampire was kind of a ripoff of, not necessarily a ripoff of, but a kind of answer to Tomb of Dracula. It was DC's own answer to that book, because they wanted to capitalize on the kind of the 70s exploitation vampire films that were coming out a lot around that time, especially the Hammer works and stuff like that. So, but what this book is really about is, we've had 3 arcs This is the beginning of the third one. We've had 2 arcs so far of this book. We've had one, Andrew Bennett, by the 6th issue of this book, is killed. Killed dead. In the second arc, he becomes super vampire. And he has this amazing, tremendous power. But to stop this grave, tremendous threat, he takes all of the vampire energy into himself. And by the end of the second arc, in I, Vampire number 12, he has made Mary, Queen of Blood, formerly Mary Seward, mortal. And all the other vampires are now mortal. And he is the last vampire, and he is filled with evil. So at the very end of the second arc of I, Vampire, in 12 issues, we've watched our main character die and be reborn as a super vampire. And now we have watched him become the villain. Andrew Bennett is now evil again, and evil as he never was before. He is full-blown nuts, and his first victim is Tig. He turns her, the one that hates vampires almost as much as he do, into his vampiric minion. So he is basically taken the place of Mary. And Mary, she would seem to be kind of a sad sack, but in fact, she is now the hero of this book, along with Professor John Troughton. And there's this great moment that she has when she's just kind of walking down the street and some mugger tries to attack her. And basically she just, because of her lifetime of experience with doing this sort of thing, she totally turns the tables on him and kills him in a very human way. Or perhaps kills him. I don't know if it's really clear if it's actual murder or not, or an actual death or not. But she, in her inner monologue, because we have a lot of inner monologue from her throughout this book, and she says, in her inner monologue, she's thinking to herself, being a vampire made me powerful. Being me made me awesome. And it's just, she still has all the same kind of confidence and all the same kind of very morally ambiguous sentimentality about her. And it is so incredibly thrilling. And at the end, we find that Andrew has caught up with Deborah Dancer in kind of living in isolation. And he comes in, of course, presenting himself to her as the good old Andrew Bennett. But he's not. And he's brought a friend. And of course, that friend is Tig. But there is only one place that Mary knew that Andrew would go, and of course has brought along Professor Troughton in tow. And they bust in at the very last minute to perhaps save Deborah Dancer from her eventual fate. And she is armed with crossbow and everything like that, and John Troughton has a fucking super soaker loaded with holy water. It's just like, oh my god, this book is so awesome. It's so awesome. It hurts. It's so fucking great. The book continues to just destroy. And I mean, so much can be said about every beat this book hits. I mean, everything is solid. Every, and just the way that it keeps the audience totally on its toes. Anything can happen. Anything goes. There is nothing, no one, nowhere that is safe for any reader of this book. And that makes it absolutely compelling. It makes it a joy to read, and it makes it deadly to have to wait until the next issue because it's so fucking awesome. I mean, as I learned last week, iVampire, the first trade, which just came out, which I have, debuted at number 4 on the New York Times graphic novel bestseller list. The 4 other books that alongside of it in the top 5, 3 of them were Walking Dead trades or compendiums, and the other one was an Avatar: The Last Airbender trade. So, I mean, for this book to debut that high, maybe it means, and Amazon well, no, I'm thinking of a different book. And it's like number 41 of the bestsellers still as of today on Amazon for DC graphic novels. It's beating out a lot of books, admittedly, that have come out before that. But, the fact that, there are so many, kind of lesser books that are outselling this book that it's beating right now is just awesome. Of course, having to go up against, in horror, like books like The Walking Dead, which is, an international fucking phenomenon at this point in time, it's going to be impossible to beat those kind of numbers. But at least for its first week, you had this glorious number 4 spot, and it's just like, oh yeah. Because if this book can garner the kind of attention that it deserves, not just needs, it deserves. This is absolutely, if watching me for the last 13 months has taught you anything, it is you need to be reading iVampire. It is... I don't like to use hyperbole too much, but I think I've honestly come to terms with the fact that this is the best book of the New 52. Slightly edging out books like Swamp Thing and Batman. That's a really hard thing to do, to edge out Snyder. But I honestly do think going back and rereading the first trade like 5 times as I've done since I've had it, and rereading some of the older issues, I mean, it's just, this book is just so incredibly awesome. And if you do not have the first trade, get it. Stop watching. After I'm done, go to Amazon, go to your local bookstore, go to your local comic book store, go get it. It's that important. It's that good. You can help save this book. So get it. Okay? So for tonight, I am done. So, and like I said, and like it needs saying, absolute 5 out of 5 for iVampire number 13. So we're done now. So thank you to all of you who watched Cat's Comics Corner, the very premiere episode that we just had. And it was a lot of fun to do. We had a great time doing it. It was not only a nice bonding experience, I loved the feedback that you guys gave. She really appreciates it too. I've kind of urged her to kind of answer your responses to that video. She's much more busy at work than I am, and when she is at home, she's on Facebook, and she's doing Farmville and all that kind of shit, so doesn't do a lot of YouTube. But I promise you we will be doing it again. I don't know about when, but we will be doing it again. Because it was a lot of fun. So again, thank you to all of you who tuned in. Thank you for all of you who stuck with me for this hour and 45 minutes now. I'm leaving now. We will do Pick of the Week tomorrow night. So until then, this has been me, James Donnelly, from the Shadow Gallery, saying good night to you all and reminding you, as always, to stay in the shadow.